Alright, so game number 2, King Hunter with the black pieces. Let's begin. And I like this opening, the Nimzo, very nice. But King Hunter, it looks like you haven't watched my opening series on it, on chess24. Otherwise you'd know that in this position, black needs to do something in the center. Either go d5 or c5, because right now white does have a threat and you are not stopping this threat. You're playing b6, which is very typical in Nimzo, to go bishop b7, develop the bishop and take control of the light squares in the center. But b6 is neglecting the threat, which is e4. If white plays e4 here, he's just clearly better already, claiming a lot of space, and you're one move too slow with bishop b7, right? So you need to do something else here. Either you can go d5, or what I play is the move c5. So I'd recommend to you to look into either one. c5 is a little bit, I say, more dynamic, and d5 is more solid. So b6, fortunately your opponent misses this chance to seize the initiative? Seize the initiative. It's such a weird word, I never know how to say it. Bishop b7, and now everything's fine. Bishop e2. And here you could have done this typical Nimzo Indian play, going in with the knight, knight e4, castle, now taking on c3 and giving white those doubled pawns on the c file, and then play with f5. I think that would have been a little bit better than what you did. Even though this is also fairly standard, d6, castle, knight b7, bishop d2, and now you take on c3. But you see the difference, right? Now white has a bishop on c3 and not a pawn, so white's pawn structure isn't weakened. Knight takes. Okay, now white decides to take with the pawn. I don't think that was necessary, but he does so. And you see, I don't have much to criticize here. You're playing all natural moves. I like your position. You have a better pawn structure. This is what I want if I'm playing a Nimzo Indian, and here a4 is another inaccurate move because white is just giving himself a weakness on a4, a pawn that can be more easily attacked in the future. Now e5 is also great, e4, and here the first moment. f4 looks nice, you're grabbing more space, but white has this maneuver which he plays with queen b3, queen b5, getting some counterplay. It was time to bring the last piece into play. The rook on a8 hasn't moved, so time to put it on e8, right? And give this pawn on e5 some more support. And also if e takes f5 now, well, I'm sure queen takes f5 would be fine, but you can also play e4. Also looks good. And just keeping your options open, right? With rook a8, you're still ready to take on e4, maybe take on d4 and threaten e4, so you keep more flexibility. Okay, I mean, technically f4 is fine, but just there's this problem of queen b3 and some counterplay here in the light squares, and that obviously wouldn't be possible if white still has to worry about the center, right? If you pawn f5, the queen couldn't go to b3, e4 would be hanging right away. Now king h8, queen b5. And yeah, now it's a little bit awkward. And you play rook fd8. I mean, this is not a move that you're dreaming of playing, since, well, the rook is fine on f8, but as you recognize, rook a8, queen c6 would be even more awkward. Queen e6 was another move, but yeah, here white is doing okay again. Having the open or occupying the d file and having enough play here. So rook fd8 is good. Rook fe1, rook c8. Rook d3, and here c6 is making your life much more difficult. You know, the thing with pawns is, as you know obviously, is they cannot move backwards. And once you have moved a pawn, well, you can only move it forward. And what that means here is that the pawn on b6 will be chronically weak, permanently. Right? Now, for the rest of the game, really, you have to keep protecting this pawn on b6. And you have to use either your knight or your bishop, or your rook, excuse me. And that's not a worthy task for a piece like that, right? Pawns want to protect each other. So pawn c7 was perfect. as it was the base for the pawns on d6 and b6. I understand that you didn't like the queen possibly going into c6, but okay, so what? Nothing is happening there. So instead you could have played queen e7 here, and if rook ed1, obviously that was white's intention with rook d3 to put some more pressure on the d file. Now you can just step out of it, play rook e8. And the point is, if white takes on e5, now you don't have to take with the pawn, but you just take with the knight and keep the d file closed. And obviously white's pawn structure would be absolutely horrible. So queen e7 protecting the knight on d7 and then preparing rook e8. This looks like it was the way to go here. If white takes now on e5, you could just take back and you would get this square on c5 for your knight. That would be also not advisable for white. So queen e7, prepare rook e8, and it's really a lot about prophylactic thinking here. What does my opponent want to do? He wants to go rook d1. What can I do to be able to answer that in a good way? Get my rook out of the d file so I can take on e5 with a piece. Alright, so c6, queen b2, and here queen g6, and I will say that a lot now, but I think you're just having the wrong plan. What we'll see going forward is that you're trying to attack with your pieces against the white king, and that's not enough. You will not checkmate with rook and queen. White can, as we'll see in the game, easily defend against that. You need to attack with your pawns. So get those pawns rolling. Play g5. I know it weakens your king, but you have the space advantage there, and that's fine. And sometimes even you might walk your king over. Well, actually this comes later. Here it wouldn't make that much sense yet as the position is not closed yet. But push your pawns forward. Play g5, play h5, and claim more space. And eventually you can try to open up the position and get to the white king. This is the only plan that will work here in this position. So queen g6, knight d2. Oh yeah, actually, yeah, queen g6 is actually blundering a pawn. And that's also an issue. I'm not sure what you were intending against d takes e5. Maybe you were looking at this. But now we see exactly this problem, that you have played c6 because your knight has to keep this pawn protected. So if you take on e5, you lose the pawn on b6. Just a pawn down here. And you have to do that actually, because if you take with the pawn, it's even worse because you end up in a really, really bad pin along the d file. Queen d2 putting even more pressure on it, and we all know this doesn't look good, right? So queen g6, I guess you for a moment were paying attention to this move of your opponent on taking on e5. And that goes back to what I always like to emphasize at some point in the streams, looking at candidate moves, and those are always taking moves and check moves first and foremost. And here, d takes e5, you always need to check this move. For every move you play, before you play every move, rather, you gotta check, okay, what happens if he takes an e5? Is that an issue? Yes, no, and then make sure it isn't. Okay, so queen g6 gave away a pawn, but your opponent missed that. He played knight d2, rook e8, f3, rook e6. Once again, this is the wrong plan. Play queen e6, play g5, h5, g4. Rook e6, rook d1. And probably you now notice, I mean, you haven't even played rook h6, but white has already defended against it. This will just not get you anywhere. Okay, queen g6. Queen a3, and now c5. Now your opponent is very nice. He plays d5, after which he will not have any counterplay anymore at all. Because his only counterplay is really connect to his pawn, which you can always defend. And you can take all your time to build up your attack, kind of, and push the pawns forward. Rook f6, queen b2, but still you're not doing it, right? Here you play queen g5, you should get your queen out of the way and push those pawns forward. Just go h5, queen f2 let's say, and go queen h7, queen f7, doesn't matter, and go g5. And then it will be the question. You can either take direct action, push forward, g4, rook g8 and so forth, or you could take all the time in the world and bring your king over to c7, which would be a perfect square because protecting b6, the king is safe here, far away from the action. On the other hand, that would probably allow your opponent to do the same. So not quite sure, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should just go as quickly as possible, go for g5, g4, and play rook g8, and then you have options to either go g3 or take on f3 and so forth. And that's the only way to do this if you want to crack through the white position. Okay. Yeah, here just nothing's happening, right? I mean, this is just not getting you anywhere. You need to push the pawns. It's the only way. You see it right now yourself probably. Nothing is going on there. You just... Okay, now you're doing it. Rook a8, of course. You notice the white threat, knight takes a5. Very nice. Okay, and this is a big mistake, h4. Because now this means that you won't have any chance anymore to open a position. White plays h3, and you don't have any way to open a position anymore. Right? Your only way to break through was going g5, g4, and now this will never be possible. White will just take. And unless you sacrifice a piece, you won't break through, and well, in most cases, piece sacrifice won't work. So h4 is a big mistake, since then the position is just locked, right? You should go rook h6, and once again, same plan as always. You've heard it already many times, and I'm sure you'll remember after this game for the future, very sure, after I've emphasized it so much. So h4, I guess you had h3 in mind, which would be nice if you can get it in, but it's your opponent's move. He sees it, he stops it, and then all you play is over. Of course, the rook looks nice on g3, but in the end, it's not doing anything. White's position is super safe now. So the rest of the game we can go through pretty quickly. Okay, here's actually the end. Here, by the way, you play rook takes g3. I mean, it doesn't matter, but still, I think h takes would be better, because White's only possibility to do something would be to sacrifice the exchange, and then you rather want to have a pawn on g3, so that if you get the b file, you can create some very nice play there, right? So just in case, that really makes sure White won't sacrifice the exchange. Whereas here, actually, when I first saw this position, I thought, maybe rook takes b6 is possible. It's still equal after that, but you say, why give your opponent another option? Okay, here you made a draw, and the position is totally drawn, so it makes sense. Yeah, so what stuck with me from this game? Well, obviously, you not implementing the right plan, pushing the pawns forward on the king side, that is certainly the most obvious. And you played a lot of piece moves there with the queen, with the rook, back and forth, not getting anywhere. So for the future, if you have the space advantage, the only way to get through is to push your pawns forward. Yes, your king will be more open, but it's fine because position is closed, so you don't have to worry about your king that much, right? Especially when your opponent played d5. There was just no play he had anymore besides on the pawn b6, but your knight just defends this effortlessly. So yeah, this definitely stuck with me the most. And there was this one with blunder with queen g6 where he blundered a pawn. Okay, that can happen. Pay attention to your opponent's candid moves, right? And then the move c6. Like I said, pawns don't go backward. really think twice about every pawn move you make. And I remember a saying of my coach, my former coach. He said, every pawn move creates a weakness. So it's always like it's a trade-off. By moving a pawn, you leave one square or another pawn unattended and create a weakness there, but in return you take over another square, right? But of course you have to be sure about this trade-off and that it benefits you. And in the case of c6, it didn't, I would say, because as we'll see, as we saw, this knight on d7 didn't move anymore afterwards, and it couldn't really be active in the game because it was just stuck defending one single pawn on b6. So that's not what a knight likes to do. All right, I will check the chat if you had any questions. Doesn't look like. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you could take something away from it. And once again, thank you for your support, and let me know if you have any questions.